Remember when I talked about the baby episode from Tom and Jerry back in November of 2020? Let me tell you, I can instantly sit through this episode, but when it comes to the issues of this episode in general, you can instantly tell onto why Tom and Jerry went through a phase in one of its earlier decades of its lifespan. I was originally going to be reviewing this episode for Cartoon Crisis 2, but at the same time, thinking about the baby episode really scarred my memory for life that I really needed to talk about that episode rather than this. But since that we're finally talking about this episode as part of Cartoon Crisis 3, better late than never. In all honesty, with this episode focusing on Tom and Jerry just looking after the baby, all the while that Janie is instantly on the phone, you can instantly tell of why people cannot stand this episode. Here's the thing, I'm fully aware that Tom and Jerry can be different things rather than Tom chasing Jerry from time to time. However, the execution of this episode, even back in the 1950s, showcased onto why Tom and Jerry wasn't really the same after the Golden Age. I mean, I understand that nothing will ever top the Golden Age, and the fact that the Tom and Jerry movies, mainly the later entries, are a completely different story. But in all honesty, whenever I think about this episode, it really feels like that it's trying to do something different with the Tom and Jerry characters, but not doing a good job whatsoever due to the terrible execution. You see, Jenny is supposed to look after the baby while the parents are away, but instead, she decides to talk on the phone. And considering that around the time where phones are either being new at the time or they were before the 1950s, they really hammered in on the fact that Janie is focusing on being on the phone rather than focusing on the baby. And believe me, if you really think that's one of the problems of what she has to offer, believe me, in the previous episodes of this, it somewhat made sense. Mainly the fact that the baby went out of the house completely, like out of the neighborhood into going to a construction site. But considering that all that happened in this episode, they went way too far. And even though that the focus of the episode may center around Tom and Jerry rescuing the baby from further danger, it doesn't change the fact that you're gonna remember the fact that Janie is really irresponsible and not taking her job as a babysitter seriously. Whenever Tom goes near the baby in Janie's sight, she instantly attacks him with a broom. The first time may be at a loss, but believe me, if you didn't see this episode yet, just look at the second time. Though then again, if you saw the thumbnail of this video, you can understand why. Because once Tom gave Janie the baby, she instantly thinks that he was messing with the baby. So she hits him with a broom again. All the while that she doesn't even realize that the true indications is that she was being neglectful, unlike Tom. I don't know about you, but in comparison of what Tom went through in the baby episode, this is a lot more complicated. Granted, in the baby episode, it's mostly embarrassment that you feel bad for him, but in this, you mostly feel bad for him along with Jerry on the fact that they're focusing on the baby, although the baby is just crawling around all the time, which is supposed to be the gimmick of the baby being mostly there for Tom and Jerry to go through obstacles for comedic effects, but at the same time, when you take into consideration that Janie is mostly responsible for being neglectful, it's literally made the comedic effects really weak. And in all honesty, the more I think about it, this episode instantly tries way too hard to be funny when it comes to slapstick humor. And when you get older and older, you can instantly realize onto why people really hate this episode. And the ending of the episode just makes it a lot more worse, that really made this one of the worst episodes from this show. Or Tom and Jerry in general, since the cop mistakes Tom and Jerry as the baby nappers, all the while that Jenny is technically the neglectful person, and even if she may not be a baby napper, it doesn't change the fact that she was still being neglectful. To be honest, if we had an episode where Tom and Jerry are the babysitters, while Janie isn't, I'm pretty sure it would have been a lot more better. Granted, there would have been a lot of changes, but I think those changes would have been a lot more better than what we ended up getting from this episode and the last episode. Like I said, there are a few highlights in this episode, but it's not enough to save this episode from being one of the worst. And for me personally, compared to what people have been addressing on which era of Tom and Jerry is the worst, I'm just gonna say this right now. Sometimes I focus on the eras that are mostly something that I just couldn't stand as time went on, which is why I didn't bother with Tom's owner being really abusive towards him. I mean, granted, it's bad, but I've witnessed this episode and the episode that I talked about in Cartoon Crisis 2, and they were in my memory for so long that I really need to talk about those episodes more than that. Trust me when I say this. When I used to be obsessed with Tom and Jerry, it's mainly the fact that I enjoyed the slapstick and nothing else, which is why in other cartoons I've grown more accustomed to them rather than Tom and Jerry. Trust me when I say this, the franchise of Tom and Jerry is mostly a mixed bag, and witnessing these episodes, believe me when I say this, there's a reason onto why I haven't gone back to the series, even though that there are a few episodes that I actually enjoyed. But keep in mind, it's only a couple of episodes. I'm giving this episode a 3.5 out of 10.